Yo, welcome back to the live stream. It's your boy Tokyo Stoner, and today we are doing our Final Fantasy VII Rebirth review. Let's go, let's get straight into it. So, just for context, I'm a lifelong fan of Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII is my favorite of all of the series. I've played Remake about 400 hours in Remake, and before coming into Rebirth, I replayed Remake. So I ran it through on hard mode. And I did like a boss rush, and then I shifted into Rebirth, just to fully play the two games as one, because it is one continued story, right? And also, just to be clear, I'm reviewing this game on its own merits. I'm not comparing it to the original, and I'm going to be respecting it as its own game. I mean, certain times we might just be using the original for context, but we're not comparing it, and we're not going to be getting onto it because of changes in the story or whatever. We're gonna just respect it as its own game and look at it like that. I've got a bunch of notes that I've written down here through my playthroughs and everything like that, so I'll just be going through them one by one, and yeah, let's keep it skipping. So first thing I noticed after tripping into this game, one of the first major things is the lack of identity. The game has a big issue with identity and knowing who it is. It's got elements of Horizon Zero Dawn in here. It's got elements from Tomb Raider in here. It's got elements of Ghost of Tsushima in here. It's got elements of Far Cry in here. It's got some Kingdom Hearts elements.
Look at the
but
size of it.
for all of those things that they've brought into the game, it doesn't really have anything that feels like Final Fantasy VII. The only thing that feels like Final Fantasy VII to me are the characters. The characters and the world. But the world itself, when you're exploring it, it doesn't feel like FF7, so when we talk about identity, I feel like as a series, being someone who's followed it from the beginning through, it does feel very much that this game's lost its identity in a big way. No clear gameplay loop. So I do think that that's a big thing for me. There's no clear gameplay loop, like in Need for Speed, you're racing. In Tomb Raider, you're solving puzzles. In the original FFs, I've thought about it a while. I'm pretty sure it's exploration. You're exploring, and that's, exploring worlds and discovering things. No clear gameplay loop in this. The clearest gameplay loop I could identify was like a cutscene, dungeon, boss fight. Cutscene, mini game, boss fight. There's no actual gameplay. It's just like dungeons and mini games with a few boss fights chucked in between the cutscenes. Yeah, very long, boring dungeons and way too many mini games. I mean, on screen you've got an example of one of the dungeons, so that's pretty good for you to see. But yeah, loads of dungeons, way too many mini games. The mini games are good. The mini games are not bad. The mini games are really high quality. They're like some of the best mini games I've ever seen in any game. But they're not skippable in a lot of instances. They feel forced on the player, and because of that, the negative experience you have, it kind of made me not want to play any of those games again. Do you get what I mean? Games that I was originally excited to play, like Queen's Blood or Visiting the Gold Saucer, I quickly didn't want to play them anymore, because of the way they were introduced. The forced slow walking and the warning signs is pretty nuts. Just like in a racing game, when you're going the wrong way, you get the flashing warning sign that says wrong way, wrong way. That happens to Cloud. If you go the wrong way, the game will let you know you're not allowed to walk this way, and it will force slow walk you and turn you around and give you a warning sign. So I feel that really breaks the immersion. Whenever you find new towns, there's this weird thing where like the mini map pops out and the quest marker becomes very big and you don't really know where to go, and that's because the game just wants you to wander around the town with no direction until you walk into the right room or speak to the right NPC that triggers the cutscene. So I think that's very lazy game design. There's these slow time events. I've called them slow time events for myself, but basically, like the worst one I can remember is you're in Junior and you walk up to this lift and you have to hold R2 or something on the lift, and you wait there for a good 30 seconds while the lift raises, and you just have to hold R2 the whole time. Nothing happens on screen, and that's meant to be gameplay, and I was really shocked by that. I mean, there's other instances of where Cloud's crawling and you have to hold R2 to crawl forward, then hold L2 to crawl forward, then hold R2 to crawl forward. Very slow quick time events, I played Bayonetta the other day, and in there the quick time events is just snap, 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 and if you miss them, you're dead. In this, you miss the quick time event, nothing even happens. It does feel like you're watching the gameplay itself, so that's one of the notes here I've got. So it's like, it's a lot of, with the climbing in this game, for example, when you're on the yellow climbing posts, you know, you're just kind of moving the analog stick around, and Cloud's just hopping around the place, you know. The dungeons, you're just walking through these long corridors and fighting trash mobs. There's a lot of the game just feels like cutscenes and then boss fights thrown in between. So that's what I mean by you're watching the gameplay itself. There's very little interaction, very little actual gameplay that you get throughout the course of the game. Very few actual gameplay sections, you know, or like a clear gameplay loop. That, like I said earlier, that's a big thing, is that being able to play through it and having it loop in, having something you can get familiar with, because every chapter has a different mini game, or you know, it's very difficult to, you know, it just doesn't flow very smoothly. Like I say here, it feels like you're watching the gameplay itself. In the OG, this is downtime, so it's hard to turn it into a full story. Now, I think that's a good point, because basically this game starts at Calm and it ends at the Forgotten City, or the city of the Cetra. And now basically most of that period of the game is downtime. You've just come out of Midgar, which is very exciting, very intense, extreme moments of the game. And coming out of there, you know, going into Calm, going into Chocobo Ranch, Fort Condor, you know, Junion, Gongaga, Coral, Gold Saucer, Nibelheim, Rocket Town, Wutai. That whole period of the game is very calm, very chill, very relaxed. You're basically bonding with your team. You're learning how the game works. You're becoming stronger. You're exploring the town. You recruit Yuffie. You recruit Vincent. You recruit Sid. Yeah. It's only really when you get to the Temple of the Ancients and the Forgotten City that the story really starts to amp up. Do you get what I mean? And you spend most of that time fighting with Shinra. So if you use that as a middle downtime portion of a much larger story, then it really works quite well. But when you try to stretch it out into its own game or its own story in itself, it becomes very difficult, because there's no clear beginning, middle, or end. It's just, you know, a bunch of in this game, the way it feels like, is a bunch of episodes kind of loosely stitched together, and then no real story progression happens until the last chapter. Yeah, so the sphere grid from episode 10, you know, from Final Fantasy X. The sphere grid wasn't bad per se, you know, in this or in 10, but it just kind of threw me off, you know, because the game I bought, or that I paid for, says Final Fantasy 7. So I was just a bit thrown off seeing things from FF10 in the game. It's not the worst skill tree at all, I won't say that, but you know, it's just I recognized it from a previous game. I recognized it from what it was, and I was just a bit like, really, you got FF10 stuff in here? Why not save that for the FF10 remake if you ever do it? Do you get what I mean? The card game from FF8, you know, I mean, Queen's Blood is not a bad game, you know. I'll say, all the mini games in this are really well produced. They're some of the best mini games, you know, you could find in a game. So I'm not going to sit here and say Queen's Blood is bad, but I was going to say the way it was introduced to the player, personally for me, I really didn't enjoy it. And it wasn't easy to see how to quit out of the tournament, right? So I kind of sat there and I thought the tournament was forced on the player. So I really had a rough experience with the Queen's Blood, and I was looking forward to actually playing that game, but I won't be playing it. I won't be playing it anymore, like because of the negative experience I had with the way it was introduced to the player. I'm just going to clarify this, that we touched on it earlier, but yeah, no clear narrative thread to follow. Feels like a collection of separate episodes. It really does just feel like a collection of episodes stitched together with no narrative thread that flows, you know, no act 1, 2, or 3. It's just a bunch of separate chapters with a crazy hype ending. Yeah, so unlocking the same weapon abilities from the previous game, I think that's insane, you know, because I've spent 400 hours in Remake, and so transitioning to here, there's no progression system, you know, like this could have been a DLC or an expansion for the original, or you could have had a save system. So say, for example, if you've beaten the original on hard, when you load up this game, straight away you have access to hard and all your old gear or something with an increased level cap. But no, like you pick up this game, it doesn't matter if you've played the original, you're unlocking the same weapon abilities as the previous game. So all of your focused attacks, which if you're unfamiliar with the game, focused attacks are a really important part of being able to damage bosses and stuff. All your focused attacks you have to relearn. With Cloud, for example, you have to relearn counter stance, you have to relearn triple slash, you have to relearn Infinity's End. With Tifa, Barrett, you're doing the same thing, relearning abilities that you've already learned in the previous game. And if you spent a lot of time in the previous game, these abilities have become core parts of your combat flow. Yeah, so to have them removed, it's like the combat system also is not revolutionized enough that it feels like a different combat system. It feels like the same one with little bits added onto it, right? So when you shift from Remake into Rebirth, especially if you're a returning or a high level player, it does very much feel like you're playing exactly the same game, except your characters have been nerfed to level 0, and so is your gear. And that's not a good thing that you want the player to be experiencing or feeling, you know, especially returning players, because I feel like when you're trying to do a series like this, you need your players to keep coming back to keep the series alive. Do you get what I'm saying? Limited materia selection, best materia locked behind busy work like scanning rocks for Chadley. That's the next point. And yeah, I think that's I personally, as a player, I really didn't enjoy that game design choice. I thought that was pretty weak. I mean, we're not going to compare it, but we're just going to mention, originally in the OG game, you just pick up materia on the floor. You know, you pick up a materia, you put it in your armor or your weapon, and it works, and that's it. That's quite, you know, that's pretty cool. In this game, you know, I think I went to find them. I had to go and smash a rock, then I had to go and smash like a bunch of other rocks to max out the materia. Then you go and you find Chadley, and then you fight the summon for Chadley, and then you unlock the summon. You know, that's so much busy work for something that should be fun and exciting. You run around the map looking for little resources to collect, and I think that was a really poor choice. Also, the best materials in the game, the materials that are sold in the shop, are kind of mediocre. The best materials in the game are all given to you by Chadley, but if you want to buy Chadley's materials, you can't do it with Gil. You need your special Chadley coins, so you have to go and do your Chadley side quest, which mainly is about scanning rocks or fighting trash mobs for him in certain areas. So I think having Chadley in the game and having him have more side quests and stuff for you to do is not necessarily a bad idea, but I think locking the best materials in the game behind that busy work is definitely a bad idea for the player. Yeah, wasted resources. So when I say that, I'm just basically referring to the sphere grid, the card games, the mini games, you know, how many mini games there are. I believe that the resources were wasted because, I mean, look at this climbing right here. This is gameplay, you know. This is the actual gameplay is this, you know. So it looks very good. There's a lot of like stuff built around the game, as in, like I said, cutscenes and mini games, but I'm pretty sure those mini games are not cheap to make. I'm sure Queen's Blood was not cheap to make. These are big investments they're making to get these things put together. So for you to be dedicating that much resources to things like Queen's Blood and the Rocket League and, you know, the Gold Saucer and stuff like that, but the rest of the game suffers, as in, like, a lot of let's see Cloud jump up here. A lot of the time they kind of teleport. They don't move smoothly around the map. There's a lot of the animations in general are of a lower quality to Remake. And so I just feel like the resources could have been better spent, maybe fleshing out the combat system a bit more, making sure the animations were smooth, and maybe, you know, looking at the actual gameplay itself and making sure the game was a bit more engaging throughout, you know, rather than just saving all of it for these mini game moments and everything's mediocre in between. Yeah, I just touched on that, but the next note is cheap, unfinished animations. I mean, I feel like the combat animations, specifically Cloud's, they look better in Remake. Cloud's combat animations in this, I'm not a fan. They look kind of cheap and flimsy, like they're not fully fleshed out. Yeah, getting around the world map is frustrating and boring, 100%. Getting around the world in this game is a chore. You know, trying to get through the grasslands is a chore. Trying to get through Gongaga is an absolute nightmare. I mean, Gold Saucer is even pretty tough in itself as well. Traveling the Gold Saucer is, getting around the world map is horrendous. Gold Saucer is not the world map, but just in general, getting around the world in this game is not fun. It's very difficult to navigate. You're constantly walking into walls or stuff you can't, and you have to go around. And yeah, I just found it quite unpleasant. And also, it doesn't help that the animations are so janky. You know, Cloud and the gang constantly teleporting over rocks and stuff. When I was running around, it didn't feel like fun. And having beaten the game, there's no like end game free world state where you can just explore, or not that I could see. I had to reload a chapter and like travel around from within that chapter. So yeah, I just wasn't a big fan of the way that felt as a player. Yeah, so getting around towns can be frustrating. Some towns have internal fast travel, as if even the devs know it's frustrating. Like Cosmo Canyon is the one that I'm thinking of. Cosmo Canyon and Gold Saucer, they both have fast travel. I mean, the original Gold Saucer had like a fast travel system, but yeah, it just feels like, especially at Cosmo Canyon. Cosmo Canyon is so big and it's such a maze and it's so difficult to navigate around the town that it does really feel like when you meet the guide, because at a certain point you unlock guides in Cosmo Canyon. You go and speak to them and they say, hey man, are you lost? Let me help you get where you're going. And they open up a list of fast travel locations within Cosmo Canyon, because that's how big Cosmo Canyon is in this game. So yeah, not only is getting around the world in itself quite frustrating and tedious, getting around the towns is also very tedious, and I'm pretty sure even the devs recognize it, as demonstrated by being able to fast travel around Cosmo Canyon and Gold Saucer. There is no feeling of discovery or traveling from place to place. The game mostly teleports you to important locations. No sense of true exploration. The world feels closed. Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of speaks for itself. But yeah, there is no feeling of discovery or traveling from place to place. You do feel very much like you're on rails and the game is just moving you along, and you're not even really doing much. You know, you don't have any agency in where you go, how you go there, why you might want to go there. The game just takes you where it wants to take you, and you just follow along and defeat the bosses along the way, do your mini games and watch your cutscenes. Yeah, transitioning from one game to the next as a player feels disjointed. No experience or equipment carryover. No day one hard mode. So yeah, that speaks for itself. But exactly that, man. I think, you know, as a returning player, there should have been some kind of carryover. They should have thought that through. I mean, especially where you've come out, they've gone out of their way to say this is an episodic release, you know. If it's a series, as in, you know, part 1, 2, 3, like Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, they're all quite different. Yeah, they're the same, but they're different. This is not different enough from Remake that it feels like a different game. It feels like the same game, which makes you argue that it should have been either an expansion, a DLC, could have been the same price, whatever, but like an expansion, a DLC, or you should have just had a straight, you know, day one hard mode carryover system. Yeah, you could have had equipment carryover with an increased level cap or a DLC structure from the base game. So yeah, because of this, because they neglected to put that in, the combat feels undercooked. New abilities added on top of the remake combat system are not enough to keep it feeling fresh. It might have felt better if you could carry over your gear to keep the depth from the previous game. And yeah, 100%, you know, if you could have just kept rolling, you know, and brought your stuff from the previous game, and maybe, because the level cap in Remake is level 50, maybe if this game had like a level 70 cap and then you could unlock the new abilities as you play, that would have been pretty cool, you know, that would have been alright. Way too many cutscenes. Cutscenes are also very long and often quite boring with meandering dialogue. Gameplay structure is, yeah, dungeon boss fight, mini game boss fight. Dungeon boss fight, mini game boss fight. No memorable or recognizable boss fights, which is very true. I mean, there's about, the only boss fight I can remember is 2 of them. The final boss and the classic Geen Attack from Cosmo Canyon. You know, I can't remember any of the other bosses. And even Geen Attack was, you know, nothing to write home about. It was alright, you know. Yeah, stretches out sections just to extend game length. So I mean, look, this review's gone on a little bit. I think we're about 20 minutes in now, and as you can see on this section here, like, it's been going on and on and on, you know. So yeah, man, very, very long sections that feel like that Square is just trying to get the game to hit that 40-hour mark where they can say, oh, this is a 40-hour game, but like, when you really look at what you're doing for those 40 hours, it's not much, you know, very stretched out. Yeah, I don't really understand why the team are on this adventure or what they're trying to achieve. So yeah, again, we'll draw this up, but not to diss it compared to the original, but in the original you are very aware of what's going on. There's stakes, you understand why the team are out on this adventure. In this game, I don't really understand, and I don't get why Barrett hasn't just decided to go home and take care of Marlene, you know. The motivations of the team are quite unclear, and I just feel like it would have been really good to, in this game, kind of add some kind of sense of urgency and give us some reasons as to why, you know, Cloud and the gang are on this adventure. Some of the members, obviously, you know, you can get Sephiroth, you can kind of get Aeris, but like, You know, like I said, Yuffie, sorry, Barrett, I don't really understand why they're here. I did in the original, but in Rebirth, I don't. The game feels to be of a lower quality than Remake in almost every aspect. Yeah, I'll stick with that. I think Remake was definitely a much higher quality game than this. That's how it felt, especially shifting from one to the other back to back. Remake definitely feels like a higher quality game. Yeah, many of the combat animations, especially Cloud's, look more like Sora from Kingdom Hearts, and I think that's very true. You know, Cloud's got some, he's got a lot of floaty Keyblade looking stuff in this game. Yeah, so the Horizon Zero Dawn yellow climbing post, Ghost of Tsushima owls, Far Cry towers, noisy minimap, noisy icons. The game has lost its identity. You can see the influence of many games, but it's hard to see anything resembling FF7. Final Fantasy 7, that is. 2 skill trees is too much. The game recognizes this and lets you set 1 skill tree to automatically fill itself in, because the way the game works is you're meant to unlock your weapon abilities and your folios at the same time, but it all just becomes a bit too much, and so the game lets you do some of it automatically. And if the game lets you do it automatically, to me it's kind of like, well, does it even need to be here? You know, it's probably just fluff. So, you know, I'm sure if you really want to get tripped out into your characters, it's probably alright, but I think having less is more is sometimes better. Just having 1 really well designed skill tree is better than having 2, you know. Well, that's how I feel, at least. Summons and other rare materials are all locked behind Chadley's data research, so you have to explore the open world, activate towers and scan rocks in order to unlock the best materials in the game. Very boring. These are personal now. Emerald Weapon is a giant fish. Vincent is not a playable character. Sid is not a playable character. I won't say that because that's a spoiler. But the whole game feels like a filler episode, and it really does feel like a filler episode. The positive, I guess I could say, is that the combat looks like fun with some new toys compared to Remake. However, as a returning player, you must be prepared to grind the game again if you want to fully enjoy it. 100%, like 100%. It's a shame the game has no memorable chapters or boss fights for you to fight against. Of course, you could spend all day in Chadley's simulator for cool boss battles, but it gets boring pretty fast. 2 times I almost quit the game was Mithril Caves, Chapter 3, and Nibelheim. I think that's Chapter 12, Chapter 13. No, Chapter 13 probably. Chapter 12. The Gold Saucer, I could imagine a lot of players quitting the Gold Saucer because it just looks rough. I mean, here's a good example of the bad animations. Characters look bad, graphics look bad, the lighting is bad. It just doesn't look very good, you know, compared to Remake at least. In reflection of all those things I said, yeah, sales are down across the board, and they have been on a decline since FF7 Remake. Remake sold 700k physical in Japan, FF16 sold 300k physical in Japan, and Rebirth sold 200k physical in Japan. Sold 260k first week, and there was a 90% drop in the next week where it only sold 24k. So in Japan, this game sold 260k one week, and the next week it only sold 24k. So not much positive word of mouth going on around there, yeah. Obviously, that's not all the sales data, but it doesn't paint a good picture, you know. When Remake came out, they were very quick to tell us it had sold 3 million in 3 days. You know, this is not the same story, you know. Yeah, so in conclusion, the Remake series, well, we won't do that, that's spoiler, but yeah, I mean, it's clear from Remake 1 at least that this timeline diverges from the original, which immediately lowers the stakes. You know, multiverse stuff, we as an audience are kind of done with it, especially after Marvel just ran it into the ground. So yeah, instead of making a new game with new characters, they have made a new game and used the Final Fantasy VII cast to try and sell it. It does really just feel like this could have just been a brand new game, and Cloud and the gang are only here just to help sell the game, you know. Yeah, I say this about Nomura, and I'm pretty sure it's him, but you know, anyone in the space. But basically, Nomura just wants to make his own game with his own ideas, but Square Enix keep forcing him to work on FF7 titles. They should just let him make what he wants at this point, because his ideas end up in the game anyway. And I think that's a fair, that's my opinion, you know. But I think that's a fair opinion to make. There's many concepts from Fabula Nova Crystallis, you know, Final Fantasy Versus 13, the alternate dimensions, the way they affect each other, you know. Yeah, the Remake series could have been one of the greatest games ever made, but instead, for me, it hurts the existing Final Fantasy VII brand. As a lifetime fan, this is the game that made me fully disconnect from Final Fantasy as a series, and I'll play Final Fantasy VII Original again one day, but I no longer see Final Fantasy as a top tier game series. Final Fantasy VII is one of, if not the best video game of all time, but modern Final Fantasy has lost so much of its identity, I feel like it's time to let it go. Always remember the classics for what they are and what they achieved, and accept that modern Final Fantasy is aimed at a different audience. Yeah? So here, we'll have Cloud climbing on these Horizon Zero Dawns, and nice one, we got through it. That was a lit review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care. Hype and Describe, links in the description. We stream regularly on the channel, YouTube and Twitch, all the rest. Yeah, stay lit. If you're playing this game, I hope you're having a good time. If you're not, put it down and play something else, because it's not that good in my opinion. But anyway, take care, and I'll catch you lot in the next one. Peace.
Nothing but money on my mind. She say she love me, love is blind. She ride it up and down and then rewind. When we fuck, it gets better every time. I got 2 bad bitches by my side. I tell my ops don't even try. Anytime I lift, I let it fly. Come down and put 2 spirits in the sky. Hit your block and put some spirits on the floor. Niggas know I got a lot, but I need more. Nowadays, all my guap is kept offshore. Stash box, I got a couple keys of raw. Whoa, the weed is Arabian, burning it down like a Sabian. I'm coming down to the stadium, rolling with angels and aliens. There's only real ones in my radius. Everyone here know my alias. I'm coming down to the stadiums, rolling with angels and aliens. She take it straight to the face, laughing all of the way to the bank. Pardon, I take it straight to the face, pull up and parking. Jump out the spaceship, step over your carcass. When you look around, you see killers and carnage. My niggas is Martians, yeah, we live and die by the stardom. Even when we're in the darkness, you know we stay lit regardless. All of your bitches, they love me, all of your hatred is harmless. Only the gods can judge me, yeah. Even when we're in the darkness, you know we stay lit regardless. All of your bitches, they love me, all of your hating is harmless.